You are stuck in a loop, replaying conversations in your head, trying to understand the exact moment when everything fell apart, thinking about what you could have done differently, and perhaps, more than anything, with that suffocating feeling that you lost something precious, someone who seemed to be a part of you. And now only memories, longing, and a silence that weighs like concrete remain. If this describes you, listen carefully. The pain you are feeling does not come from the loss itself. It comes from your mistaken idea of what was lost. Alan Watts said that our culture has a sick obsession with permanence. From a young age, we are taught that a good relationship is one that lasts forever. That if it ended, it's because it failed. That if the person is gone, it's because something went wrong. But what if all of this is completely wrong? What if the pain you are feeling now is a consequence of a deep misunderstanding? What if the end is not a tragedy, but a necessary transition? You did not lose that person. You lost the illusion that they would stay forever. And maybe, just maybe, they were never meant to stay. Some people come into our lives as temporary teachers, intense, transformative, unforgettable, but still temporary. They did not come to stay. They came to teach. And when the lesson is learned, the cycle ends. This is not failure. It is evolution. But the mind does not accept this easily. It wants control. It wants explanations. It wants to go back in time and fix what went wrong. And it is at this point that we begin to suffer, not from the end itself, but from resisting what is already gone. As Watts said, trying to make a relationship last forever is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips away. And the more you try to understand, reverse, or justify the end, the further you move away from the true meaning of that connection. This video is not for those seeking shallow advice. It is not for those looking for blame. It is for those who are ready to see what is really happening, to go beyond the victim narrative and discover the truth behind the pain. Because when you change the question from, "Why did this happen to me?" to, "What did this person come to teach me?" something begins to transform within you. You are about to see that what you called loss may have actually been one of the greatest gains of your life. Why does it hurt so much when someone leaves? Why does a relationship that comes to an end feel like a personal catastrophe, as if something vital has been ripped away from us? Alan Watts would argue that the root of this suffering lies in the unconscious and deeply ingrained obsession our culture has with permanence. We grow up with the idea that the success of a human bond is measured by how long it lasts. They married and lived happily ever after. Childhood friends are forever. If it was true, it wouldn't have ended. But who said that truth needs to be eternal? Western culture, shaped by religious traditions, rigid family values, and social expectations, has taught us to fear endings, to avoid breakups, to see any termination as failure, as if the duration of a connection is the only proof of its worth. But Watts invites us to look at life with different eyes. Instead of resisting impermanence, he shows us that it is the only constant. Everything changes, everything flows, everything is transient. Trying to trap life in fixed structures is like trying to freeze the sea and expecting it to remain an ocean. This obsession with permanence is a mental prison. And the cruelest part is that it disguises itself as romanticism. We make impossible promises. Forever, I will never leave you. You are everything to me. But we don't realize the weight these words carry, because every time a natural cycle ends, we think there has been a failure. And that's when we start to blame ourselves, to question our worth, to ruminate on what we did wrong, when in fact, nothing went wrong. It just ended. Like everything in life ends. Watts warns us, Clinging to permanence is to deny the very essence of existence. The river flows, the tree grows, and then falls. Night turns to day. The tides rise and fall. So why do we expect our relationships to escape this universal logic? The answer is simple. We have been conditioned to confuse love with possession, relationship with permanence. But to truly love is to allow the other to go, if it is time to go. It is to recognize that the beauty of a connection lies in its intensity, not in its duration. Liberation begins when you abandon the idea that what did not last was less true. A love may have been deep, real, transformative, and yet not meant to last. And that's okay. The value of an experience is not in the forever, but in what it was able to reveal while it existed. But if this is the truth, why does it hurt so much when it ends? Why, even knowing this rationally, do we feel as if we have been rejected, wasted time, or failed? In the next part, we will explore the 3 misconceptions that fuel this pain, and how Watts teaches us to dismantle them one by one. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You feel as if something has been ripped away from you. The pain is real, intense, paralyzing. But what you may not have realized yet is that this pain does not come from the end itself, but from the meaning you assigned to it. Alan Watts did not see suffering as a direct result of reality, but as a consequence of distorted mental interpretations, internal narratives we construct without realizing, based on cultural and emotional illusions. There are 3 main distortions that turn the end of a relationship into a psychological minefield. The first is, I was rejected. I was not enough. This is perhaps the cruelest. When someone leaves, you do not just feel the absence of the person, you feel as if you have been invalidated as a human being. You interpret the end as proof that there is something wrong with you, that you were not good enough, that you did not know how to love, did not know how to keep, did not know how to deserve. But Watts confronts us. This thought is not real. It is just a wounded ego. Not every separation is a judgment. Often, it is just a misalignment. You may have done everything right, and yet, the paths did not align. And that says nothing about your worth. To say you were rejected is to assume that the other was a judge and you were being evaluated. But relationships are not courts. They are dances. Sometimes the rhythm changes and no one is to blame. The second distortion is, all the time I invested was wasted. This narrative turns years of life, affection, and experiences into something disposable simply because it did not continue. It is like looking at a sunset and saying it was not worth it because it lasted only a few minutes. Watts proposes another view. Duration does not define value. A relationship may have lasted 2 years and taught you more about yourself than 20 years of stagnant marriage. Time was not lost, it was lived. And if you came out transformed, more aware, more mature, then the investment was worth it. Thinking that only what lasts forever is worthwhile applies a contract logic to what should be experience. The third distortion is, I should have done something differently to avoid the end. This is the cycle of guilt. You revisit every conversation, every choice, every silence, hoping to find where you went wrong. But this is the illusion of control. Watts reminds us that relationships are encounters between 2 streams of consciousness, 2 beings in constant transformation. You do not control the growth of the other, nor your own. When the trajectories diverge, there is no unilateral effort that can prevent the inevitable. Thinking that you could have saved everything alone is an ego trap, which prefers to blame itself rather than accept that it was not in your power. These 3 interpretations are like dirty lenses. They distort vision, amplify suffering, and block the possibility of learning. But when you recognize them, when you take off the lenses, something powerful happens. You begin to see the end not as a sentence, but as a revelation. And that is where true transformation begins, because a question starts to echo within you strongly. If I did not lose, then what exactly did this person come to teach me? In the next part, we will walk through this door and discover how to reframe the pain of the breakup into a process of deep learning, and how this shift in perspective can forever change the way you relate. You spent so much time trying to understand why it ended. But maybe you were asking the wrong question all along. Instead of, why did it end? Why did you leave me? Or, what did I do wrong? There is an infinitely more powerful, liberating, and transformative question. What did this person come to teach me? Alan Watts did not see relationships as contracts of possession or emotional guarantees. He saw them as living, dynamic, impermanent experiences, like encounters between moving consciousnesses. And each encounter, no matter how brief, carries a lesson. A code. A message meant to accelerate your awakening. When you shift the focus of the narrative from the role of the victim who lost something to that of the learner who received something, everything changes. You stop viewing the end as a failure and start seeing it as a natural conclusion of a growth cycle. Like in a book where each chapter exists to take you to the next stage of the story. Some characters remain, others appear only to show you something essential, and then exit the scene. The mistake is thinking that the value of a character lies in the number of pages they appear on. But sometimes, the briefest character is the one that leaves the most impact on you. Watts would say that suffering only persists when you interpret the ending as a loss. But when you interpret it as a lesson, it dissolves into understanding. The pain may linger for a while, but it changes color. It matures. It stops being a dagger and transforms into a compass. And here is the most important point. This lesson that the person came to bring you could not have come any other way. That's why the connection existed. That's why it needed to end. The rational mind screams, "This doesn't make sense." But the deeper wisdom whispers, "It happened exactly as it needed to happen." Did you learn to love? Did you learn to stand your ground? Did you learn to say no? Did you learn to recognize patterns you were unconsciously repeating? Did you learn to see yourself more clearly? None of this would have been possible without that experience. And that is what transforms the end into a beginning, the beginning of a new consciousness. But what if the lesson is more specific, more practical? What if there are concrete principles you can apply now to dissolve the pain and extract the wisdom from this ending? That is exactly what Alan Watts proposes, a new way of looking at relationships, not as possessions to be maintained, but as disguised teachers. In the next part, we will dive into these principles and discover how to apply them to finally transform your wound into strength and your longing into wisdom. Are you ready to stop suffering? Are you ready to exit the emotional maze and turn this breakup into a turning point? Then it's time to put into practice the principles that Alan Watts offers us to transcend attachment, guilt, and the narrative of loss. These are not shallow pieces of advice. They are philosophical and psychological keys that, when truly understood, unlock a new way of existing and relating. The first principle is abandon the illusion of permanence. Watts was relentless with this idea. Suffering begins when we believe that things should last forever. But nothing in nature is permanent. Everything moves, everything transforms. Relationships are no exception. Expecting them to last forever is to ignore reality. And that is the most direct path to frustration. Do the exercise that Watts proposes. Complete the sentence. I expected this person to remain permanently because I believed that. Now question that belief. Did it come from you? Or was it imposed by society, culture, or romantic movies that confuse love with a contract? Letting go of that belief is the first step towards emotional freedom. The second principle is identify the specific lesson. It's no use saying, "I learned about love." That's generic, superficial. The depth is in the detail. Ask yourself, what did this person teach me that I didn't know before? And dig deep. Perhaps they revealed that you tolerate disrespect out of fear of being alone, or that you sacrifice your values for approval, or that you are capable of a vulnerability you never imagined existed. When you name the lesson, you transform pain into knowledge, and knowledge is power. Without it, the experience risks repeating itself, because the universe tends to resend the lesson until it is learned. Third principle, recognize that perhaps you were the lesson. This is hard to accept, but essential. Sometimes, you entered someone else's life to teach them something. You were the mirror, the challenge, the trigger they needed to grow, even if it cost you something. Don't see this as defeat. See it as a mission. You planted a seed, and even if you never see the fruit, the impact existed. Watts reminds us, the value of a connection is not only in what it gives us, but also in what we offer through it. Fourth principle, practice non-attachment. Non-attachment is not indifference. It is love without dependency. It is saying, I loved deeply, I cared completely, and now I let go entirely. This is spiritual maturity. It is stopping the attempt to relive a past that has already fulfilled its purpose. It is allowing life to flow without trying to imprison something that is already gone. Fifth principle, change the language of loss. Words shape thoughts, and thoughts shape emotions. Saying, I lost someone, assumes that something was unjustly taken from you, but saying, this relationship has concluded, acknowledges the natural cycle of things. This change may seem subtle, but it restructures your way of emotionally processing what happened. It was not a loss, it was a conclusion. And there is dignity in that. These principles are not beautiful ideas to be admired from a distance. They are tools, instruments of liberation. And the more you integrate them, the more you become someone who loves with presence, but not with imprisonment. But there is something even deeper. What if, in addition to identifying the lesson, you could consciously honor this experience? What if it were possible to rewrite the final narrative with gratitude and not with resentment? In the next part, we will explore how to transform this closure into a true ritual of wisdom, and how this attitude can mark the beginning of a new phase in your life, much more aligned with who you have become. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. If you have made it this far, you have already understood something that most people go their entire lives without realizing. The end of a relationship is not the end of you. It is not your ruin, nor your emotional condemnation. It is, in fact, the beginning of a new stage, one that requires awareness, maturity, and above all, gratitude. Yes, gratitude, because even the relationship that ended in pain brought you something you would not have learned otherwise. Alan Watts valued the power of radical acceptance, and he understood that human beings need psychological rituals to internalize transformations. A cycle does not close just because a conversation ended or a ring was returned. It closes when you consciously choose to end the narrative within yourself, and this only happens when you are able to look back and say sincerely, thank you. Does it seem impossible to be grateful for something that hurt you? Yes, at first glance. But here's the point. Gratitude does not mean denying the pain. It does not mean romanticizing what happened. It means recognizing that even in chaos, there was meaning, that even in confusion, there was learning. Retroactive gratitude, as Watts taught, is the ability to honor the past without wanting to live it again. Try this exercise. Write a letter that you will never send. Address it to the person you lost. But this time, instead of accusing, complaining, or begging, thank them. Say, "Thank you for showing me where I still didn't know how to love myself. I am grateful for allowing me to experience an intensity I never thought was possible. You gave me the gift of revealing the part of me that still needed to grow." This simple act has immense power. It returns the authorship of your story to you, because while you are stuck in resentment, you are bound to the experience as a victim. But when you choose to recognize the lesson, you become the protagonist, the one who was touched, transformed, and now moves forward with more clarity. And it is not about forgetting. It is not about pretending nothing happened. It is about integrating, making part of your emotional body what was lived without it needing to hurt anymore, like a scar that no longer bleeds, but tells a story of overcoming. And perhaps the final step is this: to let go once and for all of the victim role. To stop telling yourself the story that you were abandoned, rejected, or betrayed, and start telling the most powerful truth, that you were shaped, awakened, and prepared for something greater. But what exactly does it mean to let go of the victim narrative? How can we identify when we are still trapped in it? And how to take the final step towards total emotional freedom? This is what we will explore in the next and final part. Because the closure of a cycle is only real when you not only understand, but transcend the story that held you captive. The time has come to face the hardest and most liberating truth of all. You are not a victim of your story. No matter how much you have been hurt, how much you have been left, betrayed, silenced, or ignored, you still have a choice. The choice to keep repeating that pain as a justification to stay trapped, or to use it as fuel to build a new version of yourself. Alan Watts said that suffering only persists when you insist on interpreting life as if everything is happening to you, and not for you. The victim believes that everything is unfair, that the universe has wronged them, that the other person is to blame for their pain, their emptiness, their insecurity. But this view, although understandable, is paralyzing. It puts you in a cycle where you hand over your emotional power to someone who is already gone. The way out: abandon the victim narrative and take on the creator's stance. This does not mean that what happened was right, nor that you deserved it. It means that now you decide what to do with it. You choose which version of the story you will continue telling yourself. Will you say, "I was left because I am not enough," or "This experience showed me exactly what I still needed to heal in myself"? Watts believed that true freedom begins when you stop fighting against what has already happened and start transforming it into wisdom. You can keep saying, "I was rejected," or you can say, "I realized that I abandoned myself every time I asked for crumbs of love." You can say, "I was betrayed," or you can say, "I learned to never negotiate my values to be accepted." The same fact, two narratives. One path traps you, the other frees you. And if, for a moment, you still think you can't, that it's too hard, remember this: you have already survived what you feared the most. The person is gone, the relationship is over, and you are still here, feeling, breathing, seeking to understand. This in itself already shows that there is strength in you that you may not even realize. So what comes next? Now, you choose yourself. You gather the pieces, not to try to glue the past, but to build something new with what you have learned. Now, you live with more awareness, more presence, more discernment, because you understood that some people did not come to last. They came to awaken. They came to teach you what only pain can teach. Now it's up to you. Comment below. What was the biggest lesson you learned from someone who is no longer here? Sharing your truth can be the first step to solidifying your transformation and inspiring others to do the same. And if this message touched you, don't stop here. The next video is important. It will show you something you still need to hear. Something that can change more than just the way you relate. It can change the way you live. See you there.